century. Bob, you joined us last night as that happened. I wanted to get more from you on today because you came out, my friend, with something that I really want to talk about.
What's up?
I find it astonishing. You came out with a telling comment that Israel was the only democratically elected government in that region. When we have people on the BBC pouring their guts out saying, oh, Israel this and Israel that, and defending and refusing to call, let's be honest, Hamas a terrorist organisation, Hezbollah, these are proxies. They are paid, financed and directed by the Mullahs of Iran. And you were very forceful on that. Why do we have a national broadcaster, Bob, that won't even call Hamas a terrorist organisation?
To be honest, Jeremy, I have a lot of sympathy with what you say. I was pretty shocked by the soft ride that Misha Hussein gave the phenomenally anti-Semitic Iranian speaker on the Today programme yesterday. And I think it was a King's College academic who basically was saying that Hezbollah and Hamas were sort of playing by the rules yesterday. I mean, OK, you could interpret that as being... There's different ways of interpreting that, but I think it was an unwise thing to say when you've effectively got proxy groups who are trying to kill people, as long as they're Jews, pretty much indiscriminately. And I thought that was not the BBC at its finest on either of those. Really very poor.
Do you believe that the BBC is essentially anti-Semitic? Do you believe that the BBC is fair and balanced in its reporting of certainly the situation in the Middle East? Because this comes back again and again, Bob.
I don't think it's anti-Semitic, but I do think that the BBC always seems culturally to take a position which is either anti-British or anti-American or anti our allies. So it is phenomenal how little interest there is in the appalling behaviour of authoritarian regimes and how much obsessive interest there is in finding fault in democratic law-governed states. Now, clearly, human societies are by their nature imperfect. And clearly, I'm not a fan of Benjamin Netanyahu, and I think some of the things done by the Israeli military in Gaza are difficult to defend. So I'm not one of these conservatives who blindly supports the state of Israel. Israel, however, is a democracy. Israel has the right to defend itself. And if these people don't want to get bombed in Hamas and Hezbollah, and if they don't like their pagers exploding and their walkie-talkies exploding, which I think is actually fair game, then maybe they shouldn't try to kill Jews, you know?
I completely agree, and although you won't say the BBC is anti-Semitic, that is your opinion. To me, the BBC is rather like the Labour Party. They seemingly have little or no understanding about how ordinary, everyday people feel. Of course, the sights and scenes of Gaza are disgusting, but there seems to be, the bedwetters, as I call them, Bob, do not seem to understand that these people, right, are terrorists. These people have driven their power by fear, by murder, by all the things. And it annoys me, right? You just said something that really, I mean, I agree with, but it annoys the bits off me. Our national broadcaster is essentially, from what you've just said, in many instances could be viewed as anti-British. And that's what I feel about the Labour Party. All these apologists who always seem to put us down. I don't want our country to be put down. I'm proud of our country. Should a national broadcaster be slagging off Great Britain? No, not at all.
No, I tend to agree with you. I think sometimes I think sort of, you know, being balanced, being objective is very important. But if you're then actually just highly subjective, and if your forms of objectivity is just to be incredibly negative about this country all the time, then I just think that is unfortunate. I mean, look, Jeremy, you raised the case of Gaza and Hezbollah, which we were talking about. When you have organisations that are effectively putting up their own people, and I use that in a very loose sense, but putting up their own people in order for them to be killed, civilian hostages, civilian sort of front, in order for them to be killed by Israeli bombs, and just say, look, the Israelis are killing Palestinians, when you simply try to victimize your people by getting them killed by the other side, that is profoundly morally difficult. And the Israelis, okay, there have been civilian casualties.
Yep.
But the Israelis will say, we are trying to protect our own people, whether they're Bedouin, whether they're Arabs, whether they're Jews, Israeli citizens, from these terrorists. And they are trying to avoid civilian casualties, but it is very difficult to do that if you have a terror organization like Hamas, who is citing its HQs under hospitals, under, under schools.
And I always want to shout from the rooftops that all those people across the world that go, oh, poor Palestine. Yes, absolutely it has a right to exist. But can we look at what Hamas has done inside Gaza? The billions of pounds that they have spent creating this web of tunnels and this organisation to basically attack the Jewish state. They don't seem to appreciate that, the people that criticise. These people are terrorists. And what we talked about this yesterday, you and I, presumably the answer in the long run, I don't know how it happens, is that the people of Lebanon and the people of Gaza turn against these terrorist regimes. I mean, Hezbollah's not a... they have control, I think, militarily, apparently. Hezbollah, it has a bigger army than the Lebanese army. They have people in power, in political position. How is that allowed to happen? Does anybody stop and think that the Lebanese people and the Gazan people are being taken for granted and abused, as you quite rightly said, by these terrorist proxies from Iran?
I think that, look, it's a very difficult, complicated answer, because once you have effectively these cancerous terrorist organizations within a society, and even if they have a political wing, even if they, collect your bins and stuff, effectively, if their primary role is a military role to attack another state, it is going to be profoundly difficult. The problem is with the Palestinians that there was an answer to this, and it was the peace accords that Yasser Arafat should have signed over 20 years ago, and you would have had peace over 20 years ago. The problem is that the Palestinians have been appallingly led. They were in the pockets of the Soviets. They're in the pockets of some of the worst sort of Arab states, and the ones that encouraged them to continue to fight against Israel. Palestinian people have been incredibly badly let down by their own leaders and by other people within the Arab world, and indeed Iran and, states like Syria. And unfortunately, they have driven them into a phenomenal dead end where instead of moving on, instead of making peace, instead of accepting that the world changed in the 1940s when Israel was founded, they've simply gone back to this sort of zero position that, Jews and Israel must be driven into the sea. And it is simply not going to happen because the Israeli state won't let it happen. And unfortunately, I think the Palestinians have been incredibly badly let down by many people who claim to be their allies, but in actual reality have been very bad friends to the Palestinian people, including their own leadership, including that idiot Yasser Arafat.
In terms of when we were on air yesterday, after the attack, Israel very quickly vowing revenge after that Iranian missile attack of over 200. US as well. I thought this was quite interesting. I still by 6:30, the British government hadn't responded. Eventually they did, but the US, almost within 20 minutes, promised severe consequences after Iranian attacks. They said we will stand shoulder to shoulder with our ally and allow them and help them to defend themselves. What comes next in your mind, Bob? What happens?
I think the Israelis accepted that. I think they miscalculated earlier this year in April when they attacked a diplomatic facility in Damascus and killed some top Iranian commanders. We shouldn't weep for those people because they were horrible. They were IRGC Revolutionary Guard leaders. Yeah. But I think there was a miscalculation and potentially an overreaction. So I think what's going on in both minds in Tehran and in Israel is whether either side wants war, wants to escalate, and if so, how to get what they want out of the situation without escalating in a way that they can't control. So one of the questions is, very few people, I think there's one person, a Palestinian, ironically killed. There was a gun attack yesterday as well. So the question for Israel's leaders is to what extent they wish to escalate this up, given that they have struck Hezbollah relatively successfully. Yeah. And do they now want to get into a position where they attack Iran's either oil facilities to hit their economy or their nuclear facilities, because it could be that if Iran has the bomb in 2 years' time, this would have been Israel's chance. So that's what the Israelis are probably thinking. Tehran is thinking, how can we hit Israel in a way that doesn't get Israel bombing our mainland, bombing Iran proper, and what realistically can we do without provoking more Israeli action and potentially a US intervention as well.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Iran will know at the back of its mind. I felt yesterday that they sort of had to respond. What was it sort of? I mean, I would never suggest 200 missiles is just making a point. Do we know about casualties? Do we know about what's actually happened on the ground, Bob?
I don't think, I was reading earlier, I don't think there have been many casualties, and I think there were some people killed, unfortunately, by the gunmen who were then killed yesterday. So there have been very, very few casualties. And one of the remarkable things about Israel's air defense is how incredibly effective it is. It's not just, we talk about Iron Dome. Iron Dome's just the localized tactical bit, but the whole system of the integrated air defense, the Arrow missiles for shooting down long range, the what's it called, David Sling for shooting the medium range, and then you've got Iron Dome for the very low range and the tactical. It's phenomenally effective. And you see that actually a nation that properly defends itself, looks after its own people, regardless of whether they're Jews or Arabs and Muslims or what have you, but at the same time gives itself more space. Because if Iran had killed 1,000 Israeli citizens last night, you would now undoubtedly have full-scale bombing. You would have had significant escalation. So by defending their state well, Israel has given itself more room to maneuver to decide what to do next, whether they wish to escalate, whether they wish to use it to assassinate more IRGC people, take on the Iranian leadership, whether they wish to target economic infrastructure in Iran, or potentially the nuclear facilities as well, if they think this is their one chance.
And with you, just finally about Netanyahu. I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, and it's interesting because we always believe politically, it would be, a two-state solution very quickly after October the 7th, which he absolutely had to the right to retaliate to. He was saying, I don't believe in that. And actually, for a while, the Israeli people, there was a massive demonstration a month or so ago, 300,000 people in Tel Aviv. But actually going and doing what he's done to Hezbollah, he's neutralised, I think, Hamas to a degree, certainly more than it's ever been known. And now, I suspect I'm right in saying, you'll tell me, that Israel is behind Netanyahu, are they not? And yesterday, of course, will allow him to say, look, we're being attacked, we have to defend ourselves, right?
I mean, for better or worse, I think that's true, that the Netanyahu... Look, I don't think you go to war to stay in power. And I don't think Netanyahu is that immoral or that sort of leader who would do that. So I think there is a wider calculation that was taken by the Israeli leadership, and that is that it couldn't, after what happened with the Hamas attack last October, on October the 7th, it couldn't just manage risk anymore, because there was always the chance that it would not succeed in managing that risk, and then you'd have 1,000 or 2,000 dead Israeli citizens. So it felt that it has to go on the front foot. But clearly, by the successful operation to kill Hamas's entire leadership, in military terms, a phenomenal achievement, no two ways about it, a remarkable achievement, and to do it in such a targeted way with so few civilian casualties is a remarkable achievement. The question is, how much time does that buy? Because Hezbollah will be rebuilt. Hezbollah will learn lessons. And you're right, this problem becomes much more easy to solve with a two-state solution. Absolutely. But with Hamas in charge of the Gaza Strip, that is incredibly unlikely. So effectively, you're just going to have a continued sort of, the crude military term was mowing the lawn, just degrading your enemy until they can't fight you. But the problem is, if you're not making a political settlement, they keep coming back eventually.
Bob, really good to have you on, by the way. Upcoming book, Total War. When's that out, by the way?
Should be out in March, hopefully February, if I can get it finished in time.
New Forms of Warfare. Bob Seely, thank you so much indeed for joining us.